Okay, we've got 13 attendees. Why don't we give it enough time for maybe one more person to show up, just because we don't want any bad luck. And there we go. We have 14 people. Do you guys want to go ahead and kick it off?
Yeah, we don't want any bad luck, right, with this program?
No.
No, of course not. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first of probably several outreach opportunities over the next 3 months or so for Serta's Regional Early Action Planning 2.0 program call for projects. My name is Sean Tejan. I'm the executive director here with the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. And I'll do a brief introduction here on the program. And then my colleagues, Michael and Mehdi, will provide a summary of the REAP program, where it matters to you and how you can be involved. And then we will have later some polling questions. There will be a question and answer period. And we'll have also a couple of next steps. Michael, next slide, please. So just for anyone that might be on the webinar here and doesn't know who we are, the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency is responsible for assisting with transportation planning for the entire Shasta County region. We're an independent agency that serves both the federal designation as a metropolitan planning organization, as well as the state designation as a regional transportation planning agency. A big part of our focus is to help all of our regional partners at the city and county level and the Caltrans and tribal governments to administer state and federal formula and discretionary funds to help improve the regional transportation system here in Shasta County. One thing that you'll learn through this program is the state continues to move forward in an effort to assign more funds at a regional level to help accomplish the goals and strategies outlined in regional agencies' regional transportation plan. Specifically, the sustainable community strategy part of that, which is meant to try to tie together both land use and transportation housing to help encourage more infill development, more affordable housing, opportunities to increase public transportation and help increase the economy and make economies better in regions across the state. On this REAP program, Michael, next slide. The REAP 2.0 program is a state-sponsored activity, and it is overseen by 4 state agencies. The primary agency is the California Department of Housing and Community Development that is overseeing this program, as well as it's been managed with other partners through the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, the California Air Resources Board, and the Strategic Growth Council. With that, I'm going to now hand this presentation over to Michael and Mehdi to provide information about the program.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Cooker. I'm an associate transportation planner here at Serta, and I'm one of the project leads along with my colleague, Mehdi Moadani, who you will be meeting shortly here. And I've went ahead and put our email addresses into the chat, so please feel free to contact us anytime. And the office phone number I am putting in there right now as well. And a little later on, I'll put a link into the project page that we have for this effort. So with that, let me get into my part of the presentation here. I wanted to talk to you about the background on this effort. So REAP 2.0 kind of came about through this math, and that is a recognition that the state is currently not on track to meet its housing and climate goals for the future. The REAP 1.0 program, which was locally administered by the county, was a great success. There is a state surplus and infusion of funding last year. And so that resulted in the legislature making a big investment in what they're calling the REAP 2.0 program. So the REAP 2.0 program is a $600 million program that's funded through the state general fund. It's part of our California Comeback Plan, which is done to help the economy come back after the effects of the pandemic. And the vast majority of that $600 million, 85%, is going to what they call the metropolitan planning organizations. And that's a federal designation. Once a certain region hits a certain size, they are required to have a metropolitan planning organization, or an MPO for short. And Serta is that for the Shasta region. And each MPO is given maximum award amounts based on the projected 2030 population. And so the Shasta region's maximum award is a little over $2.2 million. So what are the program goals for this effort? Well, it's defined as invest in housing, planning, infill housing supportive infrastructure across the entire state that reduces vehicle miles traveled, increases housing affordability, and advances equity. The objectives of the program are to excel infill development that increases housing supply, choice, and affordability, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. What would that look like? Well, locally, the gold standard for that kind of effort would be this project right here, which hopefully we're all familiar with. It's the Market Plaza down on downtown Reading, formerly the site of the Dickers department store. So very affordable, ties into our transit and our active transportation quite well, allowing people the choice to seek, different ways of traveling other than the car. So some of the proposed uses for this program. The nice thing about this program is outside of its very specific goals, it's pretty flexible. So if you can come up with an idea to meet the goals, then you're good. So some of the proposed uses that they put forth in the guidelines would be combining with other eligible uses and other non-REAP 2.0 efforts, provided there's a reasonable relationship. And we can talk about what that would look like, at a future meeting or offline. And then each proposed use, which is basically Serta's application into the state to get these funds, must advance all of the REAP 2.0 goals and objectives that I just discussed and provide a significant beneficial impact. You have to explain the nexus to the objectives, provide a reasonable and verifiable methodology, and of course we can help with that. That's part of our job. And there has to be equitable targeted outreach, and Mehdi's going to talk more about that here shortly. So,
hey, Michael?
Yes.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting comments that I guess the chat is disabled and no one was able to see some of the contact info.
Oh, that's not good. Okay, I'm not getting that at all. So luckily I do have a slide at the end where people can copy it down. It won't be as easy as copying it out of the chat, but I think once the meeting started, I can't turn it on. So my apologies for that. So some of the eligible uses that some of you could be thinking about to get these funds would be working on affordable housing development program, and that could include pre-development costs or capital investments, projects in general that increase housing, infill housing near jobs, transit, and resources. It could include rezoning and guiding documents to make it easier to build infill development, whether it's updating development standards, plans, ordinances, general plans, specific plans, community plans. It could be infrastructure planning and investment to support infill development, like improvements for water, sewer, transit. It could be infrastructure projects to help expand active transportation, like a protected bike lane. It could be implementing a Vision Zero program. And for those that may not be familiar with Vision Zero, that's a new thing that's coming online both in the state and federally, where jurisdictions are being encouraged to set the goal of significantly reducing or entirely eliminating deaths and traffic violence. Or it could be just funding actions to make it easier to use transit, whether it's implementing, a common fare system where you only have to buy one ticket, or syncing up transit routes better so it's easier to transfer from one system to another. And there's a big list on pages 11 and 12 in the guidelines, and we'll provide a link to that here at the end of the presentation. Now, what are some ineligible uses? I thought it was important that we talk about that. One of the big ones is anything that increases roadway or highway capacity. That's not going to get us where we need to be in terms of reducing VMT. It could be anything that's an ongoing expense. It could be costs associated with auto or motorcycle parking, although there are carve-outs if there's EV charging, that may be feasible. Could be any proposed use of the surface parking component. So if you're thinking of an infill building with surface parking, that's not going to be allowable through this program. And another ineligible use would be street construction or repair to benefit vehicular traffic, because those funds are available in other places, and that won't help the state get where it needs to be regarding VMT. And so basically what we're doing is we're going to be, in the coming weeks, we're going to be issuing a call for projects and soliciting ideas from all of you and others. And what Serta is probably going to end up doing, because we're not an implementing agency, we don't build projects, is we're going to partner with somebody. And luckily this program is really flexible, so we can partner with a great deal of agencies. And here's just a partial list here, and there's the full details on pages 19 to 20, but we're allowed to partner with the county, with the incorporated cities in our region, with transit agencies like RABA, tribal entities, and that's in the California, that includes more than just federally recognized tribes, community-based organizations, public housing authorities, academic institutions, and developers of affordable housing. So that kind of covers my section of the talk. I'm going to turn it over to Mehdi here to now talk about the outreach aspect of it. Mehdi, you're on.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mehdi. I am a new transportation planner at Serta. And I'm going to talk about our outreach plan, and in addition to talk more about the eligible purpose uses. There is an emphasis on equitable targeted outreach in this program. The priorities, proposed uses, suitable planning and implementation ratio, sub-allocation needs and criteria need to be identified using this specific outreach. The outreach should be unique for RIP2 program and should include the required activities during the performance and implementation. The required public review is at least 21 days, and the engagement methods should cover the involvement of disadvantaged and historically underserved communities, including tribal entities. Next slide, please. We started the required outreach activities through this webinar to have initial communication with stakeholders, cities within the Shasta County region, and tribal entities. The next step will be distributing specific information among interested partners to connect their inputs with the eligible priorities, proposed uses, funding amounts, and appropriate blend of planning and implementation. And for this purpose, we will have a workshop and we can discuss the possible eligible uses and priorities in our region. We will have a poll now, and I want you to answer this question to let us know if you are interested to participate in this workshop. So we can wait for a few moments. Okay, I think we can continue. Thanks for your votes. Good. Okay, we can close the poll now. We will have a specific meeting with tribal entities also to include their interest in priority setting. And I think you need to go to the previous slide. Yeah, this one. The previous one. The previous slide, please. Yeah. We will have a specific meeting. Oh, We will have a specific meeting with tribal entities to include their interest in priority settings and proposed uses. We are going to talk about the identify uses and priorities in this meeting and reconsider them based on our discussion in this meeting. Next slide, please. Yeah. After finalizing the priorities and proposed uses, we are going to have a call for projects. We will have a meeting for interested partners to discuss the call and selection criteria before publishing the call if needed. However, most of the required activities like input on project ideas and input on the application process will also be discussed during our next week's workshop. As I mentioned just now, we will have a workshop next week for interested partners. The finalized call will be published on the Serta website sometime around the middle of October, and the projects will be selected by the end of November. And we are going to use social media and Serta website to receive public comments, and we will finalize the selected projects after presenting them to the board on the 15th of December. Next slide, please. Yeah. As I mentioned, the outreach and engagements need to be continued during the performance and implementation. And so we are going to consider outreach as a requirement for the sub-allocation criteria, and we will use social media and the Serta website to receive public comments during the performance and implementation also. Next slide. Here you can see the summary of the planned activities. After this webinar, we will have workshops and meetings with interested partners and tribal entities. And then the call for projects will be published on the Serta website sometime around the middle of October. And the list of the initial selected project will be ready by the end of November. And the list will be finalized after our board meeting on the 15th of December. Next slide, please. We need to relate all identified priorities and proposed uses to the outreach. So we can say that all identified priorities and proposed uses are outreach outputs. Our unique housing, land use, transportation, climate change, equity, and other planning priorities need to reflect RIP2 goals and objectives in addition to considering inter and intra-regional coordination, equity, eligible uses, the amount and goals of sub-allocation, and appropriate blends of planning and implementation activities in a manner that addresses the unique needs of the region related to housing, land use, transportation, climate change, equity, and other planning priorities. For the appropriate blends of planning and implementation activities, I can say 70% and more is recommended for implementation. We will have another poll, and please answer this question to let us know if you have any ideas or suggestions regarding planning priorities.
Okay, it looks like we have 17 responses.
Okay, let's see the responses.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Okay. Next slide, please. Each proposed use should be in one or more of these categories: infill development, multimodality, reducing driving, and increasing transit ridership. Accelerating infill development activities needs to, needs to facilitate housing supply, choice, and affordability through various planning programs, services, or capital expenditure. Multimodality is about realizing multimodal communities through programs, plans, and implementation actions. And reducing driving can be considered by shifting travel behavior through programs, funds, and other mechanisms. And increasing transit ridership can be considered through funding, implementation actions, and planning. However, as I mentioned, there should be generally greater emphasis on implementation activities. Next slide, please. Yeah. Each proposed use needs to have a significant impact on all RIP2 objectives, which are infill development, fair housing, and reducing vehicle miles travel. Accelerating infill development includes infill development near jobs and other key destinations to support increasing housing choices and affordability that effectively reduce VMT and greenhouse gas emission. Proposed uses must have housing affordability components that serve low and moderate income households. Fair housing includes proposed uses that combat discrimination and foster equitable and inclusive communities. The proposed uses must include meaningful actions that taken together address significant disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunities. Proposed uses must also support regional and local efforts that work towards ensuring all people have full and equal access to opportunities, enabling them to lead healthy lives. Fair housing may include, but is not limited to, enhancing housing strategies and new affordable housing by promoting housing infrastructure, increased transportation options, and affordability in areas of high opportunity and outside of areas of concentrated poverty, and protecting existing residents from displacement. The last objective is reducing vehicle miles traveled. The RIP2 program supports housing planning and production in infill areas that reduce VMT by encouraging planning, policies, and investment strategies that increase travel options to homes, jobs, services, and other key destinations. It is encouraged to pursue uses that support new housing development and shift travel away from driving by implementing or supporting pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and other alternative transportation programs. Next slide, please. We need to consider some other details for each proposed use. For example, we need to provide an explanation of the targeted outreach to disadvantaged and historically underserved communities and how that outreach was incorporated into the proposed use. Also, we need to explain how the proposed use meets the definition of transformative planning and implementation activity, and as applicable, constitutes a high impact and innovative project. Transformative planning and implementation activities here means actions that enable meeting housing goals that also result in vehicle mass travel reduction, including infill development, supporting residents through realizing multimodal communities, shifting travel behavior through reducing driving, and increasing transit ridership. The other point that needs explanation is region-wide benefits. Eligible activities need to have a significant region-wide benefit and are not intended to fund projects that are relatively small in scope. The next point is equity. We need to provide an explanation of how the proposed use will advance equity by benefiting disadvantaged and historically underserved communities. And finally, we need to explain how the proposed use focuses on implementation in areas that satisfy the definition of infill development. And infill, for the purpose of the RIP2 program, means areas consist of unused or underutilized lands within existing development patterns that is or will be accessible to destinations and daily services by transit, walking, or bicycling, and located in either an urban center, urban corridor, or area with transit supportive densities, or an established community consist or previously consisted of qualified urban uses, and no parcel within or adjoining the area is classified as agriculture or natural and working lands. Next slide, please. We need also to work on the sub-allocation methodology for each purpose use. We need to explain how the sub-allocation methodology addresses the unique needs of the region related to housing, land use, transportation, climate change, equity, and other planning priorities. How the sub-allocation reflects geographic equity, how outreach informs the sub-allocation methodology, how program priorities inform sub-allocation methodology, and how sub-allocation methodology aligns with RIP2 goals and objectives. Next slide, please. This one. We also need to consider outcomes and units of measurement for each purpose use. The purpose here is to describe a reasonable and verifiable methodology for demonstrating the nexus utilizing numeric targets, outputs, or units of measurement that can be measured and evaluated. And measurement outcomes should be directly tied to each proposed use. As I mentioned, each purpose use needs to have a significant impact on all RIP2 objectives, which are infill development, fair housing, and reducing VMT. The measurement outcomes need to address all of these objectives for each purpose use. And we need to measure the current status as the baseline and propose a target value as the goal, and we need to explain why these outcomes are appropriate for the purpose use. Okay, we will have another poll here. Please answer this question to let us know if you have any ideas or suggestions on eligible implementation projects.
Responses so far. 13.
Okay, let's see the results.
Let's give it one more. We don't want to end on 13.
Okay.
Okay, last chance. Okay, closing the poll.
Fine, that's good. So for those who are participating in our polls and give the answer yes or maybe to any of our questions, please provide your contact information for us by email or by just put your contact information in the chat. Then we can reach you and talk about your suggestions. Okay, I think that's all that I wanted to share, and I want to ask Michael to continue with Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Mehdi. Yeah, that may sound like a lot, but I think for our region, you know, this is something we've done before, and we're really good at this kind of thing in terms of kind of combining funds and figuring out solutions to add value to our region. So it may sound like a lot, but I think if we all put our heads together, that we can come up with a pretty compelling application. So with that said, it looks like we have 2 questions in the queue, and you're welcome to add some more. And I'll also issue just a general call, and we might be able to allow you to speak here. But let me start with the ones in the queue. First question is, how is Serta determining which agency to partner with? Is it based on RFP responses? So, Sean, do you want to handle that one? Or I can speak to that if you prefer.
You can go ahead and start there.
Yeah, so basically we're in the process. This has been a very rushed kind of effort. The final guidelines for MPOs just came out in late August. And so we're in the process of, we're doing the outreach, and we're also developing kind of our internal guidelines for that. But there'll be some sort of, I assume, rudimentary scoring rubric with criteria, and that'll be part of the call for projects once that's issued. So kind of the answer is we have a general idea, but nothing final. but it's generally going to be the best project. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll add to that on the question is that, part of that will be determining what types of projects are submitted that meet the criteria related to the program itself. There may be opportunities for sub-allocations, which does provide a little bit longer period to be able to identify that process. It does require some coordination with the Housing Community Development Department. So we're determining what that looks like right now with our HCD contact to see what that process is and whether or not there's any flexibility in more rural areas such as ours as well. And that part of the requirements may tie into the next question I think that you have in the Q&A, Michael.
Okay. Next question is, would funding that implements ATP projects have to include any nexus for increased housing capacity / development? Or could the funding simply address ATP project implementation? And I would say that it needs to have a nexus. So maybe there's an infill project going in somewhere that needs a better active transportation connection. And this is kind of like the frosting on a cake. I think that could be a very feasible application. Sean or Mehdi, did you have any thoughts on that?
So I will just add that what we are seeing at the moment, and also in communication with our other MPO partners, is that HCD and the project partners are typically looking at this and saying that any proposed application for the funds is being required to illustrate and demonstrate a nexus between the REAP 2.0 objectives of the program. So you have to be able to provide a nexus, at least in how the project would support any and all of those objectives. And so that's something we're also seeking clarification on right now, hence why we're doing the outreach here. And we will incorporate that as part of the application process to make that clear to everyone, whether you have to address each item or if you at least have to provide a nexus or if your project must include all components.
Yes, I can also add that each project can be located in some acceptable categories, such as the reducing driving or active transportation. But as Sean mentioned, they should have significant impact on all REAP 2 objectives. And to show how they can have significant impacts, they need to use some measurable outcomes. And using that measurable outcomes, they need to show how their projects can be effective for the REAP 2 objectives.
Okay. Next question, that Mehdi, I think this is one you can answer. If awarded funds, when would those funds need to be expended by?
Yeah, based on the guideline, all funds must be awarded by June 2024, and all funds must be spent by June 2026.
Okay. Another question here. Is our plan to spread the grant all over the regional area, or would one project that could use all the funds be competitive?
So I'll answer that one. That I think what we're looking for right now, this part of this outreach is to get a sense of the types of projects that could be supported in terms of the program, to identify which ones may be a good fit, as well as we'll be looking to probably identify through the call what projects we think can address best all of the requirements in the guidelines under the program to ensure that we can get all of the funding for the region. So that could be multiple projects. It could be one project. We have not decided at this point what that process looks like, specifically on that, whether we're only going to pick one or multiple. I think part of that will depend on the types of projects and project requests that we receive to then identify what's the best process going forward. But we will work on trying to provide some clarity by the time we do issue out a call for projects for everyone that's interested in applying for the funds.
Okay. And I just dropped a link in the chat to our project page for this effort that has kind of a synopsis of the program. Once this recording is finalized, it will be up on there. And there's also a link at the very bottom of the page to the NPO guidelines on the HCD Housing Community Development website. And so if you need a little more detail that maybe we didn't provide yet, if you look, it'll be in there, and anything that we produce coming forward is going to be in alignment with that. So I guess I'll issue one more call here for questions. Anyone that would like to type something in or raise your hand, I think I should be able to allow you to speak. So.
Yeah, Michael, seeing one other comment that was there. So I think we should help clarify that the roughly $2.2 million is available to the region, but we still have to apply for those.
Yeah.
So as part of that process, Serta is working to get input on the types of projects and receive requests for funding that we could potentially submit by the end of this year, by December 31st. So that way we can get that money allocated fully to the region. We want to not lose any of those dollars to the region. Unfortunately, the way that they've set up the process, it's not money that they give into Serta that Serta can then just do a call and decide. We have to work with all of our partners in the region to identify, select those projects, and then request the state through the Housing Community Development Department to give us those funds. So we look forward to working with everyone, seeking your input over the next few weeks on that process of how we can do that successfully, working with everyone in the region.
And we're all available to talk to you about any ideas or any thoughts you may have, any questions. We're here to help you. So if you think you may have something but you're not sure, let us know. Anything like that. We're just a phone call or an email away, and that should all be in the chat and visible to you all now. So I'll just give you one last call for questions. And I'm not seeing any. So I guess we were just too darn informative for everyone. So with that said, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so we're going to return the balance of the time to you. And like I said, we're just a phone call away, 530-262-6190. Emails in the chat. We have a workshop coming up in a week, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Bye-bye.